Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire drawing process of this realistic violin using charcoal pencils. So let's get started. I'm using this 250 GSM paper from my ordinary smooth surface sketchbook, which is available in almost all the art stores or stationeries around the world. So you don't have to use any fancy paper for this specific drawing. And the drawing portion area is 8 cross 12 inches. I drew the outline using grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process from making the grid to outlining on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. Now let's mask the edges of this drawing paper using a masking tape to prevent charcoal from spilling over the borders. Okay, so let's start the shading process, and when we look at the background, we can see that it's pitch black. So to achieve such an effect, I'm thoroughly filling the whole area using my medium pit charcoal by Faber-Castell. I love using these pit charcoal as it gives pitch black shade along with gliding smoothly on the paper. And along with that, its lead is quite stiff and holds a lot of pressure, which is a big yes for me. When the background is thoroughly filled, I'm also filling in the darker parts of the violin using the same pit charcoal. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outlines and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials. And you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. Okay, so as you can see, there is a lot of powder gathered over the background. So I'm dragging it towards the violin using a scale. Don't use brush for this purpose or else you will mess up the whole background. And now I'm using this powder to shade the whole violin with a bigger size fluffy brush. Keep on blending the layer in circular motions to achieve even base without any patchiness. The side of the violin also has a pitch black shade, so I'm thoroughly filling it using the same pit charcoal to achieve the required results. I'm also adding depth in all those areas which are looking dull to me. You can skip this step if your drawing is looking just as dark as needed here. Okay, so let's move on to the highlighting process, and I'm starting from this side portion of the violin. By using Mono Zero Eraser, I'm picking up all the excess charcoal from this lighter portion in between the dark one. While using Mono Zero Eraser, I had to apply less pressure, which is resulting in very sharp and uneven highlights. And we need a very soft yet blended one here. So I'm shifting towards my Perfection Eraser with a sharp tip. While working with a Perfection Eraser, you can apply pressure without any worry of extra sharp highlights. Some highlights are looking a bit dull, so I'm going over the area using a Mono Zero Eraser. You can also use an electric eraser to speed up the process for this brighter section. There is a very light, subtle texture on this darker side portion of the violin. So by using a Perfection Eraser, I'm creating such rectangular highlights. And make sure to keep the pressure on your eraser very low, as we don't want bright highlights here. Now let's move on to the wooden texture on the violin body, and I've decided to use a cross-hatching technique. I'm firstly adding these lines close together by using a Perfection Eraser and keeping the pressure low at the start, and now increasing it gradually as I move towards the lower side. Cross-hatching is such a versatile technique, so you can create multiple textures, especially the rough and grainy texture of the wood. You can play with the density of these lines to mimic how light is falling over the object and create perfect realistic textures. When the softer highlights are in place, I'm adding a few brighter ones using a Mono Zero Eraser. I'm carefully adding these strokes in between and over the previous ones we just added earlier. These brighter and softer strokes will add more dimension to the texture. Now it's time to add the perpendicular lines, and I'm using the same Mono Zero Eraser. And look how the whole texture has started to come together, just like the way we wanted here. I'm following the similar method and layering these perpendicular strokes over this top portion as well. When the lighter texture is done, it's time to add the darker details, and I'm using an etch charcoal pencil for this purpose. I'm placing my pencil and moving my hand in circular motions to achieve the required rough texture. And make sure to keep the tip of your pencil round and thick to avoid any harsh strokes. I'm also changing the pressure while adding these strokes depending upon how dark or soft the texture should be in that specific area. Okay, so now let's make the edge of the violin more realistic, and I'm adding a thin stroke on this edge. And look how this small detail added life to the whole look of it. To create a perfect blend of this highlight, I'm lightly layering charcoal over the edges and where required. I'm also adding some final touches to the wooden texture by adding a few brighter highlights in between and over the previous ones. Try to add these strokes randomly by moving your hand in back and forth motions to mimic the required texture. Now moving on to this F hole, and first of all I'm thoroughly filling it using a charcoal pencil. Now to add some dimensions to it, I'm firstly adding this bright stroke along the outline using a mono zero eraser, and then creating a gradient by adding these small dots and strokes of random sizes. And look how beautiful the texture has started to look. For the upper portion, I'm shifting towards the electric eraser as it has a bit brighter highlight. I'm also adding a few brighter dots in between and over the previous ones to make the texture look more detailed and realistic. Now I'm using a perfection eraser and adding this subtle highlight at the lower portion of the F hole, and then fine tuning it using a mono zero eraser. I'm repeating the similar process for the rest of the portion just like the way I did earlier. For the base of the violin, I'm following the same cross-hatching technique of adding straight lines using mono zero eraser first, and then adding parallel strokes and lines of random length using an electric eraser. This border line is looking a bit thin, so I'm adjusting it using a charcoal pencil to achieve the required thickness. And then adding a thin highlight in the center portion, and look how realistic it has started to look. Moving on to the base of the violin, and the process here is almost same as we followed earlier. Just keep in mind how light interacts with a wooden surface, making the texture appear light and dark. And make sure to add a few strokes with higher pressure in between to give it a more realistic look, as too much uniformity in such type of an irregular texture makes the drawing look flat instead of realistic. This specific section has wider bright highlights as compared to the top portion, so I'm adding them carefully using an electric eraser. When the highlights are done, start layering darker strokes using a charcoal pencil, just like the way we did for the upper portion. Make sure to keep the tip of your pencil round yet sharp to add required texture, or else you will end up having blunt, thin strokes, making the whole texture look too defined. Keep on adding these strokes in between the highlights or where required. Now I'm adding these denser strokes near the tail plate to mimic the shadowed effect. I'm carefully flicking my pencil upwards to create a stroke with a thick start and thin end. And then start adding these perpendicular strokes close together to create the required depth and texture. I'm using a pit charcoal as this area has pitch black shadow and texture. I'm repeating the similar process of adding darker texture for the area under the strings as well, using the same pit charcoal. To make the edge of the bridge prominent and 3D, I'm adding these thin strokes over the top portion using a mono zero eraser. These highlights are looking a bit wider and undefined, so I'm going in between them with a chisel tip charcoal pencil. And look how thin and crisp the highlights have started to look, just like the way we wanted here. Moving on to the strings, and I'm firstly adding this straight stroke using mono zero eraser with a flat tip. Notice that I'm using a scale here to ensure the strings are straight, which will also save us a lot of time and energy. When the base highlights of one string is done, I'm using an electric eraser to make it appear more bright. If the highlight is looking a bit wide, then you can adjust it by adding darker lines or strokes along the lighter ones. I'm repeating the similar process for the rest of the strings as well. Moving on to the lower portion of the violin, and the process here is same as we always follow. I'm adding the darker base in the tail piece using a pit charcoal, mainly focusing on the right portion, and then adding some blended and softer highlights onto the left side of the tail piece using a perfection eraser. I'm switching my eraser and adding brighter strokes all along the edges of this hole to make it appear more 3D. And keep on adding the softer highlights for the rest of this tail piece portion. The edge is looking a bit dull to me, so I'm adjusting it using an electric eraser. Now moving on to the next portion, and it is almost pitch black with some texture on it. So I'm using my pit charcoal to achieve the required depth. I'm also adding a few softer highlights using a perfection eraser in between the texturing process to make the area look more detailed. The chin rest is almost blended with the rest of the violin portion, so I'm creating a separation by adding thin highlights using a mono zero eraser. I'm going back and forth with my tools to add intricate details where required. For the lower portion of the strings, I'm following the similar process as I did for the upper portion. Make sure to keep the tip of your eraser clean while working on such darker areas to increase its effectiveness. The background is pitch black, so I'm thoroughly filling the whole portion using a pitch charcoal to achieve this pitch black shade. And with this last step, we are done with this super quick and easy violin drawing. It takes so much time and efforts to create these free drawing tutorials for you guys. So please leave a like if you enjoyed this one. It helps me a lot as an artist. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.